Ys 9 is, as you might expect, the 9th game in the Ys series, following the endless journey of Adol the Red. Nihon Falcom is known for two things. One is the Legend of Heroes series, which Trails in the Sky, of Cold Steel, and of Azir are all a part of. And other is today's topic, the Ys series. I mean, there's like Brandish the Planet Buster and Xanadu, but we'll skip that for now. Ys has changed quite a bit over the years, from its humble beginnings as a top-down action bumping game, a 2.5D pseudo-action game, to an RPG beat-em-up, all the way to the 3D action game it is today. Ys 9 in many ways is a celebration of the series up until now, both to its benefit and a little bit of its detriment. If I were to sum up Ys in as few words as possible, I'd say they are a series of incredibly fun and difficult action games with some real amazing music that Falcom is always known for. Falcom has its own dedicated team just for writing music for their games called the Falcom Sound Team JDK, and their music is always really fantastic. While I may not like every single song in every game they've ever made, every game with music from that team has always had an incredible number of bangers. The game's combat itself is also fairly smooth, with a great amount of frenetic action, combined with a decent amount of tactical gameplay, as opposed to just mashing your face into the enemy until it dies. Just guarding and just dodge timings have been revamped, where you can't just spam it for infinite invincibility, and require a bit of thinking and reaction on your part to really make them work in combat. Even the movement has been completely changed for Ys 9, with a whole slew of monstrum abilities that make traversing the new overworld a complete joy. Just to add to the cherry on top, I think even the story itself is fairly enticing. Ys 9 introduces a mystery fairly early on, not by blatantly saying it, but by showing it through gameplay. The mystery of not just the prison city of Balduq and the monstrums, but most importantly, the fact that there are two Ados, both of which you play as. Ys 9 is just a great Falcom action game, innovated on and brought to a more modern setting. That's pretty much my quick opinion of the game, but stick around if you want to hear more of the specifics, both all of the great stuff I loved, and some of the features that I was a lot more lukewarm on. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox is Falcom's newest entry in the Ys series, following the release of Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. Adol the Red, fresh off his previous adventure, has arrived in the prison city of Balduq with his best buddy Doki. Upon his arrival, however, Adol is immediately arrested for incredibly unspecific reasons. After being thrown in jail, Adol immediately breaks out, but is shot by Aprilis and turned into one of the Monstrums during his escape, a group of criminals who are granted unique powers, but at the cost of being cursed. These Monstrums are stuck inside the prison city of Balduq, unable to leave, and forced to battle against the Lemures in the Grimwald Nox every day. Adol, being the adventure-loving young man we all know and love, takes us pretty much in stride, eager to solve the mystery of the Grimwald Nox, the curse of the Monstrums, and the hidden secrets of the prison city of Balduq. Plenty of strange things are occurring, however, with the main one being, what exactly is going on with the two Ados? If Adol is running around outside with the Monstrums and solving mysteries, then who exactly is the other red-haired adventurer who is locked up in the tower? I think the story of Ys 9 actually has a good build-up. The mystery of the prison city of Balduq, and especially the one regarding the two Ados, was enticing enough that I was curious to find out what happened next. Even if the payoff isn't quite as good, although to be completely fair, I have absolutely no idea what kind of conclusion I would have to witness for me to think that way, I still think the story overall was decently done, and I was invested all the way through. Falcom, especially modern iterations, has always done a fantastic job regarding continuity of the series. You see this in Legend of Heroes with Trails of Azir, Cold Steel, Sky, and Ys is no different. Ys 9 is full of callbacks to previous games in the series, with references that have old fans smiling as they recall their own experiences with some of Adol's previous adventures. Callbacks like these, when done well, really make the player feel like a companion on Adol's endless journey, one that has already spanned 3 decades. Even if Ys 9 is your first Ys game, however, the game's story, like every other game in the series aside from 1 and 2, is completely self-contained so that you won't feel left out, as you run through the game with a new cast of Monstrums. One of the most surprising parts of Ys 9 to me, however, was how much I really liked Adol's character, which might sound strange considering I just said I grew up on the series, but honestly, my experience with Ys has been most of the older games, where Adol is a completely silent protagonist, who people just talk to. And even with the titles that came out in the last 2 decades, I played all of those games in Japanese when I couldn't read the language, so all I really knew about Adol before this was that he was just some, classic good-hearted hero. And even though yes, Adol is a good guy who's always willing to help those in need, his more defining feature is his incredible level of adventure. He doesn't adventure for the sake of fame, for endless riches, or even for the glory of conquering evil villains, but rather purely for the sake of the adventure itself, of solving mysteries no one else has discovered, of discovering ancient lands uncovered up until now. Adol is an incredibly endearing main character. While he has experience of men generations older than him, he also has that twinkle in his eye reminiscent of a boy half his age. Adol isn't just plain sword-wielding man A, he's a mischievous troublemaker who will innocently greet you behind prison bars, agree to any sort of questioning, and then instantly break out the minute you aren't looking to go exploring. While he still is a silent protagonist in Ys 9, his reactions to situations and the choices you can make in every conversation clearly paint a picture of a guy who is just enjoying his life all the way through, of a man with endless optimism and excitement, backed up by the experiences and skills he's acquired over his many adventures. The rest of the cast is also fairly solid. While there isn't anyone I particularly loved, I enjoyed adventuring with the cast of Monstrums from beginning to end. The troublemakers of the prison city of Balduque are a colorful bunch, from the master thief White Cat, the battle-hungry Hawk, the robotic Daw, the powerful and warm-hearted Raging Bow, and Renegade, the sharp-tongued recluse. If there's one thing I can say is great about the Monstrums, is that I think their designs are quite striking. The artwork done for all the characters in the menu look really good and do a great job of portraying each and every character, even more so than their in-game models. The 3D models aren't really a vast upgrade from Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, but they already looked pretty good in my eyes, so I had no complaints about that. The sidecast also ain't too bad, the group of supporters who end up joining the Monstrums, not directly fighting, but activating effects and cheering from the sidelines. While they don't directly participate in the fights, nor do you control them, they do a great job of rounding out the cast and giving all of the Monstrums people to bounce their own personalities off of. Although I don't think the Monstrums themselves are amazingly nuanced characters by any means, I think the chemistry they have between each other is solid enough to make them a fairly enjoyable cast. So I've managed to make it this long without mentioning the butter to the bread that is Ys, and that of course is the gameplay. Well, okay, a more apt comparison I suppose would be that the fantastic music is the butter to the bread that is the gameplay of Ys. Unfortunately, as always, I feel like I'm terrible at describing music beyond, wow, that sounds good, or it really gets the blood pumping, so I'll mostly let the music that has been playing in the background all this time speak for itself. As for something I can say without diving too deep, however, I think most of the music is really good. Cloaca Maxima is just an amazing classic rock-out song. Heartbeat Shaker gives me strong Super Robot Wars vibes, which is only a good thing. Blessing Way is so reminiscent of older games in the series in a very good way. My only real complaint is that since you spend more than half of the game time in the main hub area, Prison City of Balduque, you end up hearing that one song, Prison City, for easily more than half the game. On the other end of the spectrum, there are just some songs that you don't hear often enough. Like Blessing Way that I mentioned earlier is the BGM to Mount Eldore, which is entirely optional aside from the very first floor. This is probably an idea already, modded into the PC version I imagine, but Ys 9 could definitely use a soundtrack selector, which unlocks songs as you hear them in game, so that you can listen to all this great music while you spend all your time wandering and exploring around the main hub area. Ys 9's gameplay is separated into 4 distinct sections, all wrapped around Ys's signature hack and slash combat. For the most part, it's similar to Ys 8 in that you have a rotating party of 3, with 1 character you control, and 2 you can switch to at any time. You have normal attacks, special attacks, dodges, and just parries as well. The difference in Ys 9 is that I think everything has been polished from previous entries. Just dodges and parries have never felt better, especially with the damage boosts you get from performing these actions. With 2 different types of super bars, multiple skills, and 6 characters to play around with, there is just a lot at the player's disposal to a point where it might be a little bit overwhelming. At least it would be if everything didn't just click together. Having the ability to cancel nearly everything into another type of action really makes the player feel like they are in control of their character. If you mess up and get beaten up during a boss, that's pretty much all on you, considering you have 2 different forms of invincibility you can activate at any moment with the right timing. Now, as for the 4 distinct gameplay sections present in Ys 9, they are the exploration section in the prison city of Balduque, the siege section in the Grimwald Nox, the prison with Adol, and finally the dungeons, which make up the funnest part of the game. Exploration is the newest addition to the Ys series, where Adol and his monstrum buddies can run around a big hub area with tons of different collectibles, places to explore, stuff to buy, people to talk to, chests to open, all of which is recorded per section of the map. You start out with only the entrance to the prison city of Balduke, with more sections opening up as you progress through the story. Along with that, while you start out with only Adol, more of the monsters join after each subsequent chapter. Aside from having their own set of skills and attacks, each monstrum also brings along a unique gift, which is basically a unique form of movement that has a separate gift meter and can be utilized at any time regardless of whether they are in the party or not. Crimson King Adol teleports to waypoints, White Cat allows you to run up any wall, Hawk grants a glide, Dog grants true vision, so on and so forth. These gifts are definitely the newest addition to the franchise and are pretty well implemented. These gifts make exploring a lot more fun than it would otherwise be, and are a huge part of the dungeons as well. Between every major part of the main story, you're required to fill up a gauge to unlock the Grimwald Noxes, which can be done through side quests or random encounters during exploration. I'm really not a huge fan of this particular part. I think the gauge feels like some arbitrary way to extend game time. While the side quests are enough to fill up the gauge once, you need to do it twice between every chapter in order to unlock an extra section of the prison city of Balduke. So you have to grind in some of these random encounters if you want to access these optional areas. While these optional areas don't really contain anything aside from a few permanent stat upgrades and collectibles, I just don't like the feeling that I'm missing something, especially considering the fact that the game gives you a running percentage tracker for every chest and collectible per section, so I end up grinding between every chapter, a feeling that I'm sure others are also familiar with. This grinding isn't exactly very fun or challenging in any way, so it really just felt like a time sink. Granted, it's technically optional and it doesn't take super long, but still, I would have preferred if doing all the side quests per chapter was enough to fill up the bar twice, and grinding was just an option for players who didn't want to do those side quests. The second section of gameplay is the Grimwald Nox. It's where you team up with all the other monstrums to fight against waves of enemies, making sure they don't break the big magical jewel in the center. There's also another version where you have to break every object in the arena to finish the stage. I'll be frank in saying that I think this is probably the weakest part of Ys 9. The Grimwald Nox, for one, just doesn't really feel like it fits in with the rest of the game. This is probably due to the fact that the Grimwald Nox is actually a reskin carryover element from Ys 8, from what I've been told. My problem isn't that they used it again, it's that unlike the new gift movement options, the Grimwald Nox doesn't feel very well implemented. It feels like a bunch of mini games that Ys 9 forces the player to go through in order to extend game length. The music in every Grimwald Nox is the same. It has a canned animation of Aprilis saying the exact same lines at the beginning and ending of every round. Every one of these Grimwald Noxes are also mindlessly easy because the hordes of enemy are usually somewhat weaker than usual. The big boss of every section is also just a normal enemy that's twice as big. It feels a little lazy, to put it bluntly. Instead of being fun sections to explore different types of gameplays, they end up feeling more like filler before you get to the better parts of the game. The third section of Ys 9's gameplay is what I like to call the Adol in Prison section. I call it that because these are the sections where you play as Adol the Red, except without any of his monstrum powers, so no double jumps, running up walls, gliding, none of that. Aside from exploring the inside of the prison, you also get to traverse through the underground labyrinth that lies below. These sections are actually really fun, if only because by restricting the player to only the base movement, it really allows the developers to build interesting dungeon design without having to account for all of the wacky movement options that are normally in the game. Moving from one bridge to another with only rolling and skills to slightly extend your reach is actually a fun, challenging experience. The fact that all of these traps and enemies actually pose a very real threat to a very underpowered Adol is the cherry on top. It also works great as a story device, and adds to the very strange mystery of what is going on in these sections. If Adol is out there wrecking havoc with the monstrums, then who is this Adol sitting around in prison? Does this take place in the past or what? The last section of Ys 9's gameplay is a staple of the series, which is the dungeons. These are the areas with the new types of enemies, the places where you get to play as each of the new companions, a new environment to navigate that makes heavy use of whatever gifts you have, as well as whatever new gifts you just got, a new amazing BGM to jam out to, and finally, where you get to fight the big bosses, which is what Ys is known for first and foremost. The dungeons are the highlight of any Ys game, and Ys 9 is no different. Aside from having a big boss to contend with, there are also multiple mini bosses in every location, all of which have their own set of mechanics to figure out. All in all, I found most of the dungeons in Ys 9 to be highly enjoyable. If I had one thing I would have liked to see, however, is that I kind of wish that every boss made use of each gift you got throughout the game. While each dungeon definitely heavily utilizes whichever gift the new monster in your party gives you for that dungeon, the bosses pretty much don't require any of it. Only the final boss does, which is a shame because I think it could make for some very interesting boss design. There is a little bit of it in the game, like the spider boss that makes you use the true sight vision, but I think there definitely could have been a whole lot more. Not saying what is currently in Ys 9 isn't good, just that there was room to be even more creative. There are some nitpicky things that I haven't really gotten around talking about. For instance, I think crafting and upgrading the Grimwald Nox structures feels like a holdover element from previous games, since again it doesn't feel the most well implemented. But overall, I think Ys 9 is a great game that innovates on a classic franchise, while trying to retain as many elements as possible from previous games. While some aspects do feel like carryovers, others definitely feel better than they've ever been. In the end, Ys 9 is a fun adventure from the start of the game to the final conclusion. Adol's adventure in the prison city of Balduq is another fine chapter in the legacy that is Ys, and I can't wait to see where Ys 10 decides to go from here. If you like what you saw, like, subscribe, notification bell, and Twitter are all in the same place as always if you want to support the channel. I'm so glad I managed to finally get this out, considering I initially planned on it soon after the last one, but, well, you know, here we are. Anywho, that'll be it for this one. I'll see y'all later. Till next time.